Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. My guest on this episode is one of the most talented and celebrated pizza makers on earth, who's been sweeping up awards for years. After we chatted, his flagship pizzeria in San Francisco was named by an Italian pizza guide the 6th best pizzeria on earth. Here's Tony Gemignani. Tony, so good to talk with you. How you been?
Good to see you. I've been okay. I've been busy.
And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay, we're going to get into everything that keeps you busy very shortly, but let me start with kind of a pizza-related existential question. How did pizza become all-American food? Why is that?
Well, you grow up as a kid loving pizza. That's one thing, and you never grow out of that. It's round, square, thick, thin, communal, customizable, and it brings you back to when things were not political, things were fun. Pizza was always fun. I think that brings you back as an adult when you're able to have a bite into something that just brings you back, that memorable feeling. I think that's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And pizza started at an early age. Practically every kid loves it or falls in love with it. And it really is something that you never really grow out of. Then you have kids in life and all of a sudden you're able to share those memories or create new memories. That just makes it much more, special. So pizza, it comes through to you in a lot of different ways. So it's like I said, it can be vegetarian, vegan. It could be anything and everything. A single pizza for you, it could be half and half, it could be quarter, it could be by the slice. It's those football games, basketball games, soccer games, end of the year.
Drunk at 3 a.m.?
At 3 a.m. drunk, yeah, San Francisco.
When did you first remember enjoying pizza?
First memory of pizzas were going with my grandfather to a place called Uncle Joe's. I would love an extra cheese pizza. And I think as a kid, you kind of grew up loving a cheese pizza. And then you moved into pepperoni and you kind of remembering
so
those
cheese
nights.
Was the gateway drug.
It was. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Those nights going with my grandfather was really special. I always remember those nights. I remember the location perfectly. That was my first experience of pizza. As I was a little kid, I fell in love with it. And then later, my brother had the idea of opening up a pizzeria.
Did he have any training?
Did he have any training? Yeah, he worked at a couple pizzerias. Those were both in Fremont. They were actually very good pizzerias that he worked at. He was about 22, 23 at the time. I was getting out of high school. I was 17 years old. And he said, hey, what do you think about doing this with me? And at the time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I didn't make it in soccer. I didn't make it in pro sports. And I was like, geez, what am I going to do? And I started to make pizzas and I fell in love with it. And it was that gratification of making something very much like watching my mom cook growing up and feeding people and them getting excited about it. I got that gratification of making something for someone and they purely enjoyed it. And that was very exciting to me.
You talk about cooking and your mom. You grew up watching her cook or helping her cook on a farm? What's that story?
My parents, my brother and I, we lived with my grandfather, and he was a farmer in Fremont. We had apricots. We had everything, though, on that farm. Oranges, lemons, persimmons, kumquats, figs, everything. We grew vegetables. Growing up around that, being on a farm, having the produce being so accessible was a big part of my life. My mom ran out of basil or tomatoes. You'd go in the backyard and get basil and tomatoes. So I would learn how to farm from my grandfather. I learned a lot of how to cooking from my mom. So those were perfect. A lot of people say, where'd that palate come from that you have? It's just so balanced. And it was just about the fruits and vegetables that were in the farm. And then watching my mom cook, like I said, for hours. We'd come home from school at 3. My dad would come home from work at 6. And other than doing homework, we'd watch my mom cook for 3 of those hours. If we were chopping bell peppers or mincing garlic or things like that, we'd always help her in the kitchen. Or I'd go out and pick a lot. Fava beans in between crops in the winter, we would harvest. And I would pick those a lot. We'd bring them in and you just boil fava beans and add a little bit of oil, salt, pepper, and that's all you needed. Maybe a little bit of vinegar and yeah.
You took a course in high school that I was bemoaning to some friends has been phased out in many, if not most places. A course that was generally associated with a female clientele. You took home ec.
Yeah.
And that had something to do with you becoming a restaurateur?
A little bit. I took 2 courses in home ec. Got a teacher named Mrs. Chu, sweet lady, funny lady. I made snickerdoodles to biscuits, like, whatever you do in that class. It was one of those classes back in the day. You would be like, okay, I'm taking it. It's easy. I want to make a bunch of cookies and I'll get through high school. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. And I ended up getting a Bank of America award for home economics. It was funny. I got called into the office at the time to a counselor and he said, well, you got something special. And like, it was almost a joke, like you got this Bank of America award for home economics, but she saw something in me at an early age. It was funny. I never thought about it until later, getting into my career. You're doing events and festivals and you're getting interviewed and people talk about the history of you cooking and you kind of talk about your mom, your grandfather, and then pizzeria with your brother. But that lady, Mrs. Chu, saw something in me and said, this guy should get an award that most people don't get awards in, especially in high school. And it was funny at the time, but now you think about it, she's all, wow, she must have saw something in my snickerdoodles because it was probably the best in the class. It was cool. From
snickerdoodles to pizza, you trained at your brother's restaurant. Did you take any formal course? I mean, I
did it at the time. I learned how to make pizzas. It was, I would say, the foundation a bit, even though that foundation changed a lot. So it was a good sauce recipe at the time, kind of premier ingredients you could use in the industry he was using. So it was a nice foundation with him when I learned. We stretched pizzas, made dough from scratch. It was at Pizza Parlor, 80 seats, video games in the back, to-go delivery, dine-in. I think everything was there. It was kind of the perfect place to start, at least for me. And he had friends that worked there that he worked with that were faster than me, that were better than me, and had better oven skills. I'm pretty competitive. I think being that younger kid in the family, you always want to be faster, better than your brother. My dad was our soccer coach. When it comes to sports, you're training. You're constantly training. And I can't tell you how important that is. So I really put that into my pizza skills. On Friday nights, it's not 3 or 5 pizzas. It's 300 to 500 pizzas. You have to kick it up. You got to go to 4th gear. So you got to understand that in the restaurant business, you have to be fast. So I was very motivated and I was very critical of myself. So I wanted to be the best at every single thing, from making, from topping to finishing, to oven, to stretching, to tossing. And I had guys that were really good that I work with, and I wanted to be as good as those guys.
And when did you open a pizzeria of your own?
It took me 17 years. So in 1991, we opened up Paisano's.
Wait, you were at your brother's place for 17 years?
I was there for 17 years. It was Paisano's. I opened with him in 1991. I graduated in 91. Was 17, turning 18 when we opened. It took me 17 years to open my first pizzeria. That was Tony's Pizza Napoletana in 2009.
Which is still your flagship.
Yeah, that's the mothership. That's the one that I think you can see everything that I've done in my career. It's birthed everything from Giovanni's to the bakery to Capo's to Pizza Rocks and Slice Houses. I mean, really everything birthed from there. I had the International School of Pizza that I started in that restaurant, and I ran that for nearly 15 years.
Are you still running the pizza school?
I stopped the school because I started focusing on my franchise. I started a Slice House franchise, which is really taken off. And I didn't feel it was right that I was training a student, and 3 months or 6 months later, I was opening down the street from him. So I didn't think that was right, and I stopped teaching.
How do you keep quality up? I mean, you're legendary for the handcrafted quality of your pizza. How do you control that with a franchise?
The quality and consistency. Consistency is a little, I think, tougher. The ingredients, them ordering, the purchasing, those kind of things are usually not too difficult, at least not yet. Before I opened the franchise, I've had places in casinos, or from 49ers or Raiders and to Warriors. I've expanded pretty rapidly since then, but I think consistency and having the support, having the regional chefs are really important. The infrastructure of your company's important as you grow. So we're trying to hire more people to give that support. We'll try to do as good of a job as we can. I know it's not always perfect and always right. I think that's something that you have to accept in life. But I am someone that likes things good and consistent. So it has been a challenge for me. I think growing up and watching myself kind of grow and say, hey, I want 2 stores, 3 stores, 5 stores. And you come back to yourself, man, I just had one. I wish I had one again. And then you kind of go back and saying, I hate to say that I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to say, man, I wonder what it could have been. I want to at least try and see where it can go. And hopefully along the way, I can do the best job that I can.
When you opened Tony's originally, what was the motivation? I mean, obviously you wanted to place your own, but what goals did you set for yourself in terms of what you were going to provide the customer?
Well, two ideas. I thought I was going to do Don Michele, two styles, marinara, margarita, do a Neapolitan concept. And then I started thinking of the concept, and I took a lot of years to think. Did I want that on year 10? Did I want it on year 12? No, it took me 17 years. So I'm glad it took that long. But was I mad at the time? Did I not have the funding at the time? I didn't. I'm glad it happened the way it did, because it would have never been what it is, like it is today now. Then I said to myself, you've been to St. Louis, you've been to Detroit, you've been to Naples, Rome. What if you did a concept that had multiple ovens, multiple styles? And then I went to talk to operators, friends in the business, and they just didn't get it. They didn't understand it. More than one oven, you're going to have how many dough recipes? Like, why are you going to do all these sauce recipes? So there was a lot of whys and whats. So when you're trying to think of a concept and you visually can think about it in your head and dream about it, it can be discouraging when people don't really get it or understand it. I fell in love with pizza in its entirety. I didn't say, hey, I'm a New Yorker and I like New York style and everybody else sucks. And it's very territorial. Pizza is very almost like baseball. Yankees in Boston, your Giants and Dodgers, and this is what I do. This is my team. So I didn't look at it that way. I looked at pizza that it was made right. It can be amazing. If it's made wrong, it's not that good. And I love Chicago. I love Roman. I love Neapolitan. So I said, I'm going to create this other concept. And I had it in my head, and I didn't have a business plan at the time. I didn't have a pro forma. I had an idea, and I was young, I guess, hungry. It was before you can Google it. It was before you can go on Instagram and say, wow, that's a cast iron, and look it up. It was a lot of traveling. It was a lot of meeting, and it was a lot of learning about ingredients, regional ingredients. And you had to take that journey and that step and to recreate that into a restaurant and be about 99% right, other than you being in New Haven and having a coal-fired pizza at Pepe's. Then I wanted them to have that experience. So bringing anthracite from Pittsburgh, bringing cheeses that were not just international, but regional cheeses like Provel or a dry Mott's.
Provel is that stuff they use in St. Louis that's like processed cheese that when I first heard about it, I thought, huh?
It is. If you're an Emos fan and you want that college pizza you grew up with and to bring you back, like when things you're having a good time, that's the pizza I wanted to land on that table for that customer, for them to go to me and say, thank you. It's been 30 years since I've had this pizza, and you brought me back to St. Louis, Detroit, you brought me back to New York, you brought me back to Naples. So I wanted to create that. And now you see everybody having 5 styles and 4 styles and everybody gets along. It wasn't like that when we opened Tony's. So it was the concept that nobody thought could work or nobody really understood, but it really took off.
Today, you have places saying you have 4 styles or 5 styles. They don't necessarily have them done properly to that style. Explain to me the requirements for different ovens and different dough for different styles.
Well, the temperature is important, but things have really changed a lot. There's gas brick ovens when you think a New York style should be cooked in, but half the guys now in New York using electric brick ovens. Things have evolved. But for me, if I was getting Neapolitan, it should be 900 degrees, under a 90-second bake, stretched out by hand, San Marzano tomato, 11 and a half to 12 inches, give or take.
And as you taught me previously, surprisingly soupy.
Should be charred, chewy, wet, possibly soupy, pillow-like. It shouldn't be crispy like New York. Crispy and charred are two different things. So if I were to take you to a place and have, New York style or Neapolitan or Roman, there are specifics from the hydration in the dough to the flour that they use to the sauce that they use to the ovens and the temperature. Things have sort of tweaked a little bit over the years. Like I said, gas assist ovens, maybe in Neapolitan, or electric ovens versus gas. Still is a stone bake, just a different type of heat. So things have evolved a little bit in that. But there's a lot of places you go to still in the U.S. that say, this is this style of pizza. Like, I've been to New York. I've never tried anything like this. There's a lot of things that are misleading. Even Neo-Neapolitan and Neapolitan can be misleading. Neo-Neapolitan is not Neapolitan.
Right, explain the difference to me.
800 degrees, sweeter sauce, not a San Marzano. different ingredients, longer bake, crispier crust, things that sometimes a Neapolitan concept will land in a city. It doesn't exist. People never had it. It's soggy, it's wet, it's soupy, it doesn't deliver well. They're complaining. Customers are like, wow, this isn't great. That 900 degree goes to 800, goes to 750. They change their sauce. The pizza comes out crispier. They're making it a little bigger. And all of a sudden it's, Wolfgang Puck in an airport pretty much. So there's so many styles that gets a little confusing. But at the same time, a good example is Old Forge. I went to Old Forge a long time, did some tours with some pizza operators, had a friend that came with me, a pizza guy. Everything that you learned in school, Old Forge isn't in pizza school. Okay, so is it dense? Is it a little heavy? It is. Is there too much cheese? It is. Is the sauce over-seasoned with onions and things like that? It is. Is that the regional style that makes it what it is? That's what it is.
So, and there are so many of that kind of pizzeria in Old Forge that when you get to the border of town, there's a sign that says Old Forge, America's pizza capital, which I guess they're claiming per capita, but
yeah.
And by the way, I like Old Forge pizza. Especially, I do too. I like the white version.
I do too. I love the white version. I love it. But I was with a guy that didn't. And you can't compare it to a New York Sicilian. You can't compare it to a Roman. You're not going to look for this structure and it's hydrated. Wow, look at these pockets. It's not Old Forge. I mean, if I had that in Old Forge, I'd say, man, they really don't know how to make Old Forge. So I loved it because I understood it. But not everybody gets it. Some people get it when they're in Old Forge, but you're this pizza guy that's trying to do this cool stuff, you may not get it. It'd be, oh, wow, this is the wrong thing to do. And you would never teach somebody how to make Old Forge when you're making dough or those kind of things because it's just different.
Do you do Old Forge?
I can do it, but I don't do it. And I don't know if a ton of people would understand it as well. It's like its own style and you have to appreciate it for it. Just like Detroit is a little heavy. It's slightly dense, not bready. There's some structure to the crust, but it's not profound like Roman. And some people are like saying, oh, I'm trying to get it more like Roman. Oh, we'll just make a Roman then.
Is a Roman horizontal or square shaped?
It could be square, it could be oval. It depends if it's on a board or if it's in a pan. But usually it's long and rectangle, about almost 3 feet to 2 feet.
There's that saying that cooking is an art, baking is a science. Obviously, baking is also an art, but it requires adherence to certain chemical formulas. And if you mess them up, your product suffers. How complicated is it to make and proof the various doughs for the various kinds of regional pies?
They can be super technical, and understanding fermentation and length of maturation is important. A 24-hour rise, a 48, a 72. The strengths of your flour will vary from, 9% to 15%,
The percentage is protein or?
Protein, yeah. Protein is your strength of your flour. So certain flours are great for long fermentations. Lower proteins are great for shorter fermentations. Blending grains, there's 5 different types of refinements. So you can do a 000, 1, 2, and then whole grain. You can blend a Tipo 2 that has more grain in it with a 00 that's more refined. You're always pushing the limits on hydration, meaning more water. You can you work on your pre-ferments if you do it that way, or bulk fermentation. So there's all these ways to make dough differently.
Does the average local pizzeria guy understand? Not
the average guy, but it's changed over the years. Everyone's gotten a lot better. Do they look at their ingredients closer than they did 10 years ago? Oh, for sure. I mean, is there a renaissance of pizza for the last 15 years? Yeah. And people are understanding that. The web helps, of course, going on websites and just seeing that a lot. I mean, that's changed everything dramatically. But when it comes to ingredients, when it comes to dough fermentation, you're always trying to improve in that way. Understanding what salt does, what yeast feeds on, things like that. Browning agents from low diastatic malt to sugar to honey. There's a lot of things that revolve around making your dough better. Your dough is your foundation, is your platform, and everything goes on top of that. So, yeah.
People talk about artisanal pizza, which is a strange expression because all pizza by definition, you're making it by hand. But how do you define artisanal pizza as it's discussed in the industry?
Well, chefs and bakers came into the industry and changed it. And then a lot of people that changed the industry too were some guys like me that went to the competitions in Italy, went to the schools in Italy, came back, worked on bigas and pouliches. So you got kind of the chefs, the bakers, and then the people that ventured off to learn the craft or learn how to make it better. That has evolved. So when you think of like artisan pizza, you have your regional traditional styles of pizza, like when you think of Lou Malnati's in Chicago style or things like that. And then you kind of have these offsprings of people doing it differently. And then California has kind of a big part of that. Blended grains, ancient grains, using farm to table, those kind of words that you hear, organics, farmers markets, those kind of things that you're buying your ingredients locally. That Wolfgang Puck or Ed Ledoux really, who started California pizza. The barbecue chicken, onions, that white pie, that pizza that was like, is that going to work? Salmon and creme fraiche pizza with dill and those kind of things that where East Coasters or traditionalists would be like, wait a minute, what are you putting on a pizza? Italians could probably look at that as well. And then you have the Alice Waters that kind of did her own thing, and that's that farm to table kind of things. You see that innovative, like kind of come from the West Coast and went through the industry, and you've seen people in Portland kind of do their things and people in other states doing their things. So when it comes to artisan, was it that wood fired, but it got brought down to like what Bianco's doing? Maybe it's not 900 degrees, it's 750 and cooking it longer and finishing ingredients. That artisan kind of went down that route. Milling grains, something that we do now. We stone ground some grains that go into our California style pizzas.
What's the advantage of that?
It's a little bit healthier. It's really a bit earthier. Tasty berries a little bit more. You can use different types of grains to mill. So we mill in-house and blend 20% of that into our Caputo Blue and our wood-fired dough. So changes the protein. It absorbs more water. It's a drier grain. It's a fresher grain. It's a little bit better for you. So it's kind of all the above.
Are you inventing new kinds of pizza?
I did one actually recently called the Canotto Americano. It's a pizza very much like some people are doing in Naples right now. It's like the grandkids, great-grandkids, kind of are tired of doing what their grandfathers were doing, traditional Neapolitan, and they wanted to change it up. Canotto is a big raised crust, basically, that you like look through it and there's holes, looks like Swiss cheese. The opposite of what Neapolitan pizza is. A little bit smaller, cooking away from your flame, a little bit lower temperature, a little bit longer. And you have this profound crust that comes out, and they may finish it with artisan ingredients and things like that. Or it could be a margarita as well. I do a Canotto Americano that's unique. It's different. It's in an electric oven. It has giant micro blistering that's on it. The crust almost tastes like it's fried, but it's not. It is smaller. It is unique.
When you come back to the pizzas you most love, what are those? I
think when people ask me, what's my favorite pizza, it's almost like asking a dad who's his favorite son. I think sometimes, we all know, but we'll never say. No. I like my coal-fired pizzas. It's the only coal oven in Northern California, at least from what I understand, one in maybe San Diego. Making coal-fired pizzas, that traditional New Haven, New York-style pizzas are something that I love, I gravitate to. I think maybe as I get older, I'm 50 now, and working that Neapolitan oven, getting it out in 80 seconds, 60 seconds is a lot of moving. In a coal oven, it's 1,000 degrees, but it's a longer bake. It's a bigger mouth oven. You have cold to the left. So you have like a 3.5, 4 minute. So, you just kind of can take your time, and it's maybe not as hard on you because making pizzas for 33 years, your shoulders, your hands, you just get beat up.
It's tremendously physical work.
It is, yeah.
And not the throwing the pizza in the air, which that's fine. But I mean, the actual getting in there to do it is hard.
It beats on you. Yeah, your body gets broken up. I mean, for years I'd be working oven, and then other years I'd go to stretching pizzas and kind of move around because your body just gets beat up. But coal fire and Detroit's, we brought Detroit's to California. We were the first to bring it to San Francisco. Detroit's right now, grandmas and coal fire that I've been making a lot in the kitchen, actually.
Okay, what is a Detroit pizza? What is a grandma pizza? What is a coal-fired pizza?
A coal-fired pizza is a pizza that's cooking in a coal oven that's around 1,000 degrees if you get next to the coal. It's a little bit bigger pizza than a Neapolitan. Rather than being about a 12-inch, it could be about 15 to 16-inch pizza, maybe even a little bigger. Thin crust pizza that's stretched out on the table. I use a little bit of semolina and flour to make it a little bit crispier. I use sliced mozzarella, drop some sauce over it, almost like that tomato pie, and that you land in that oven and cook it. So it's a little bit more of a robust sauce, sliced mozzarella that you go on that pizza, like an upside down pizza that you might hear. It's just usually sliced cheese on top and sauce on top. or a sauce on top pizza. Detroit is different. Detroit is a pizza that has mine has a blend of a few cheeses. One is brick cheese as predominant. This pizza fits in a pan. You put your brick on the edge. You can add cheddar and maybe a little bit of mozzarella. I have a 3-cheese blend that cheese caramelized around the edge, and you'll end up chiseling out of the pan. I put 2 racing stripes of sauce after the bake. So post-bake, I add it because I think you get a stronger and a better pizza versus as putting the sauce on and then baking it. And those could be a variety of different ingredients, but that toasted corners where you create that crown of cheese, something that's really unique and special, and it has that almost tang of what that cheddar does when you have that almost slightly burnt mac and cheese. It has that nice tang that when you bite into it. So that's a pizza that's pretty awesome. And it could be on the thicker side, not too thin. That's more of a grandma. That's a Sicilian and kind of a Detroit.
Detroit pizza has had a moment in the last few years.
It went into COVID as becoming very popular, and then it came out of COVID as becoming extremely popular. You were at home ordering DoorDash 6-7 days a week during COVID because everybody was, and you wanted to try something new at that pizzeria that you maybe never went to, or a pizza that you never tried on that menu. And you said, oh, let's not get New York tonight like we always do. Let's just get a Detroit. It became everybody's new favorite. I saw it at all my restaurants as we had it. You saw Detroit going like this, and it became everyone's new favorite. It delivered well.
What has fallen off the popularity chart?
Neapolitan slowed down a little bit, for sure. I think your average American pizzas slowed down a little bit, and now meaning American round 12 or 20s, and you just saw more an artisan movement. You saw more of a pan movement. Pizzas that delivered well became everybody's new favorite. Pan pizzas deliver well. Pizzas that they never thought was their favorite became their new favorite because they just had to try it. And a lot of people are reluctant to try things. During COVID, people tried everything. They tried new restaurants. They tried everything. There was a renaissance of Detroit. The reason why there was a renaissance of Detroit starting in 2000, about 11, 12, and 13, was Sean Randazzo, who won in Vegas for best pizza in the world. And then after that was Jeff Smokovich, who won for best pizza in the world. And they both won with Detroit's. And then you saw the Little Caesars and the Pizza Huts trying to get into that game and starting Detroit's. And you saw a lot of places from Korea to Canada started doing Detroit's. And it was just, wow, it just took off. Before, you couldn't even find pans. When I started Detroit's, you had a source pans and nobody made them. Now you can get pans next day. It's crazy how that's changed.
You talk about winning. You've won more than a dozen international championships, have you not?
If you really wanted to count, about 16 actually. So, yep, won a lot over the years.
What is it that separated your pizza?
I always say, you have to learn how to lose first. You need to learn from your mistakes. You have to understand the game. You have to know how to adapt. You're in Italy and you're making one pizza in an oven that you've never cooked in. You made your dough in your hotel a night or two before. You sourced your ingredients and hoping the ingredients that you brought, landed. You're tired. You just got on a plane. There's a lot that's against you, and you have to try to explain your pizza to judges that may not understand your broken Italian. It's one of those things. It's the hardest thing. Everybody trains. Everybody wants to win. People that have been in the business longer than you, that have never won, they're hoping it's their time. So there's a lot. And a lot of things are against you when you're an American.
Yeah. Did you feel when you won in Italy, how do I say this politely? Did you piss off the locals?
Pissed off a lot of people when I won in Naples. I won early in my career at Pizza Acrobatics, doing tricks to pizza like a Harlem Globetrotter. They were mad when I won then, but then I became friends with everyone. And then when you walked into Naples and you win, that's the time that you're worried about getting shot or stabbed in Naples as you're walking up to get your trophy. This is surreal, but at the same time, a little unbelievable. You made a good pizza, but it's not always that case. I remember making great pizzas in competitions, thinking I was going to win and not even coming in top 10. This is before Naples. This is other competitions like in classic Italian or Roman or things like that. I think you got to practice. You got to know your ovens. You got to be able to adapt. There's conditions that could be 110 degrees, not air conditioned. Dough is wet and sweating and overproofed. and you have to make it the best you can at that moment. So there's a lot going into competitions people don't realize. The cleanliness, how you use your oven skills, how you present, there's a lot of factors involved.
Well, having had many of your pizzas, I'd give you an international championship. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
Here's a controversial question. Is there any justification for chain pizza?
Yeah, I think the chains make us better. Am I the voice of the independent operator? And now am I a franchise that have over 100 in development? So am I that chain and franchise? I guess I am.
Well, you're not Domino's in number of locations.
I'm not. But I think that a lot of the chains out there can put a bad taste in the consumer's mouth, which is great for us, because I think when they try our pizza, they're like, wow, this is pizza. And if they grew up on some of those chains, I won't say any names, that they've had all their lives and they grew up in a town that just didn't really have good pizza, and they go and try a great independent operator's pizza. I think that's the time that you're like, yeah, I'm glad they're out there. I think we learn a lot from their operations. I think we learn a lot from their marketing. I think we learn a lot from a lot of things that they do. And then they learn from us, and you see things like pizzas that are getting promoted that they never made. It's because the independent guys came out with it, or it won in Vegas at Pizza Expo and things like that. So the independents always are always ahead of the curve. I mean, I think, or at least a lot of us are. So yeah, it's important. And then you look at the frozen pizzas in that market. You have the consumer that likes frozen pizzas. You have a consumer that loves chains, and you have a consumer that loves real great pizza that are made by a lot of mom and pop stores that support independent operators. So I think you have a lot of different customers out there. Some are more convenient than others, and conveniency are great, but now you see Goldbelly and things like that, and independent guys have gotten into the frozen pizza game, not nationally like Giant in supermarkets and everything, but they've been able to make that. And I think that was positive coming out of COVID. Was you did take and bakes, you did frozen pizzas, you did everything you could to stay open. And then you learned the frozen pizza game. And I think that's evolved too for the independent operators. So you see a lot of great pizzas out there that are frozen by some great guys and girls.
That you get through a place like Goldbelly.
Goldbelly, or sometimes now at their own restaurants or at their local supermarkets.
Do you do a frozen pizza?
I do. I've always done it for years and years on Goldbelly. We were in that game early. We're at Luke's Local, which is the local place. We sell frozen pizzas to bars. We have frozen pizzas on Goldbelly. We also had frozen pizzas at a couple other outlets. So yeah, I've been lucky that I was in it early. And when COVID hit, that was one of our main sources of income at one time. That was just crazy.
Are there only some pizzas that can be frozen?
Actually, I think all pizzas can be frozen. The process is a little different. It's a great job for Neapolitan that's frozen is Keste, and that's Roberto Caporuscio out of New York. He makes and does some of the best frozen Neapolitan, and he probably sells as many as anybody in the U.S. I've gone into his walk-in, like it's frozen, and it's crazy. But I've seen Detroit, I've seen Chicago, Tavern, I've seen New York. So yeah, any style of pizza can be frozen.
Now you've gone beyond pizza. You're making bagels. How do you jump from pizza to bagels?
We've always made our sourdough bread at Tony's in the morning, focaccia at Tony's. We made fresh pasta at Tony's. And then as Tony's grew, we ran out of room. So I moved pasta to a production called Giovanni's. And then that sourdough bread, which we do our garlic bread and a lot of other things, I moved it to a bakery, and I moved my dough production to that bakery because we were running out of dough and not making enough dough. And at the same time, a guy named Adam Sachs, a good friend of mine, him and I were kind of fooling around with bagels. And I said, I should just incorporate it into the bakery. So we did Toscano Brothers Bakery. We were working on New York style bagels. And the bagel that I wanted was a slightly tough, chewy bagel that wasn't full of yeast, wasn't super sweet, wasn't giant like a donut. I wanted a bagel that was hand-formed, twisted, cooked on burlap boards. It was boiled in liquid malt. You'd flip them over, very old-school, traditional way of making bagels that didn't exist in North Beach. I wanted that because I've gone to New York and I've had great bagels, and I've gone around here and I didn't have so many. So I really wanted to bring that, because if an East Coaster came in, and I get Jersey, East Coast that come in, a lot of them from New York. They love it. It brings them back, and it's just like pizza. If you bring somebody back to when they were a kid or something that they had that they grew up with, it's very rewarding. So the bagels were very rewarding. I was working those mornings. A New Yorker come in, let me try your bagels. I heard they're like East Coast, but you got to make sure. Okay, here you go. They bite into it, or they come in the next day or the next week and say, hey, it's just really good. It's really like brings me back to home.
Well, a good bagel is truly an emotional work of art. What's next for pizza?
I see a lot of evolution in the cast iron style pizza. You see grandmas, you see tavern style, cracker thin tavern style pizzas. Those are the styles you're going to see erupt. You'll see more and more people making them, just like Detroit. So those three. Roman's coming back a little bit because more people are out and about and walking. Roman took a back seat during COVID because when you go to Roman, you see what's in front of you, you order it, and you take it to go. So you'll see slice concepts, Roman, and you'll see the others that I mentioned.
Slices don't get the respect they deserve, do they?
They do now. They are now. At a keynote I did prior to last year's, I said that you'll see a renaissance of slice concepts coming, not the Sparrows of the 80s in malls. You're going to see chef-driven ingredients. And I think if you see what we're doing at Slice House, that's what I meant. And I said it was coming, and you'll see the renaissance of Slice House.
But there's this perception among some that a slice is second rate because you cook the whole pizza, then you have it sitting there, then you throw the slice back in. In fact, for slices, you bake differently, right? You don't bake as long?
Sometimes you bake about 95%, but what makes slices so good is the reheating. And if you're using the right cheese and it reheats right, it's better than a fresh pizza. A lot of people would go to DeMarco's place, Dom's place in New York, and they'll say, yeah, I got a whole pie. It's not as good as his slices. I love his slices. You hear that a lot from guys in Brooklyn and stuff, or people that visited it. And it's true. When you get a slice and reheat it and get it, and you fold it and it cracks, but it doesn't break, and you eat it. And if that cheese, like a whole milk or part skim whole milk, grande, it'll have that butter fat that will come out, and it's just as good, but the bottom's crispier. So when you get that, sometimes the slice is better. People know that in New York. A lot of people don't know it out here, because they don't know the etiquette of a slice out here. But that's what we're trying to teach a lot of the customers that. And that reheat that makes it beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
What don't people know about pizza that you'd like them to know?
Oh, I think that, when it comes to pizza, they may not realize it could be considered healthy. At the same time, you can get all food groups into pizza or onto pizza. If you look at the vegan component and the gluten-free component, not just the vegetarian, the dietary restrictions out there, there's simpler grains that can be used. There's ancient grains that can be used. I think the operator's more conscious of ingredients. If you look at iodized salt to like sea salt and how it's used now in dough, you look at extra virgin olive oil, things like that. So I think you look at that, you're like, oh, wow, pizza's a gut buster and it's nothing but fast food. It's slow food, actually, in a way, and people don't realize that. And if you make your dough right, there's less simple sugar in older dough. Yeast feeds on simple sugar. It's lighter, airier, more digestible. I think it's evolved in a good way, and it's evolved in a healthier way than what it was in the 70s and 80s, for sure.
And the reality is you don't necessarily have to eat 8 slices yourself.
No, you can cut it into 6 and have 6.
Yeah, that's fine. It's much better for you. Tony, you're just terrific. You have done so much for pizza and taught so many people, and it's a delight talking to you. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Tony Gemignani, and if you ever have a chance to try one of his pizzas, jump at it. They're simply remarkable. That's it for this episode of Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.